welcome to another video in which I sort of ramble about my experiences in life and hope that it gives you some amount of knowledge or wisdom. Yeah. Cheers to that. I am sitting on my living room floor currently because it's where the light's the best. My daughter is sleeping next to me, my 4-week-old. I've got one of my Boston Terriers next to me. You can kind of see her head right here. Oh, there she is. Snorting. So if you hear that in the video, I'm sorry, it's my dog. It's this little girl. And yeah, I thought today I could share my experience between my emergency C-section and my planned C-section and a couple of tips that I have just for if you're going into a C-section. I do have notes. I have already tried to film this video once and it ended up really long and really rambly, so we are going to redo it. If I'm looking down a lot, it's because my notes are on my computer and I filmed this on my phone. Although I got a bonus at work, which was super exciting because you can get bonuses in the federal government if you exceed expectations. And because of that, we are gonna buy a camera. Oh, I'm so excited to buy a camera and not be filming on my phone, and the quality won't be as trash. I mean, who knows about my editing skills, but the quality won't be trash. So yeah. Anyways, little tangent. Let me give you a PSA before we even start. Here is my PSA. If you are here because you are pregnant or you want to be pregnant and you are doomsday prepping, you need to stop it. Stop it right now. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're not doing your body any favors. It is only putting you into a state of terror. So if you're just going around watching all the horror stories of people and trying to understand like all the things that could go wrong during pregnancy, really, you're just not doing yourself any favors and you need to stop. Especially if you think that you're doing it under the guise of like being in control or being prepared or whatever. It's going to be way better to be naive going into it than to be terrified. It's one thing to prep and decide to say, okay, how does the process work? Like at what point could I have to have a C-section, or like what does a vaginal birth look like? It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to just allow yourself to go down this rabbit hole of all the things that could go wrong and feed into your anxiety, because sometimes it's easier to feed into our anxiety than it is just to deal with it. So just a little PSA that if you're doing that, you're not doing yourself any favors. You aren't in control, whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever. You're not in control, and scaring yourself is not going to help your body give you the experience that you want. I can say all of this because I just did this all to myself before I had my daughter. Okay, PSA ended. Let me give you a little bit of background on who I am in my life. So I am a 32-year-old woman and I have 2 kids. I have an almost 2-year-old. His name is Zeke. He will be 2 in April, so he is 22 months or some nonsense like that. And then I have a 4-week-old, as of tomorrow, a 4-week-old little girl named Valley. And both of my kids were C-section. My son was an emergency C-section, and then Valley was a planned C-section. Zeke was an emergency C-section because I had failure to progress, which I'll get into that in a minute. And Valley was a scheduled C-section because we did not leave enough time between our 2 pregnancies. So we were under the impression that it was 18 months in order to have a VBAC. It was 18 months between your labor with child A and your labor with child B. But that's not what it is. It's 18 months between labor with child A and pregnancy with child B. So between your 2 labors, it's about 27 months in order for you to have a VBAC. So we thought we were going to be able to have a VBAC. But we weren't. They wouldn't even give us the option. Of course, all of this information is going to only be relevant if you're going to a hospital and you're seeing like a practice that includes MDs and midwives and nurse practitioners. If you're just seeing like a midwife that comes to your home or a doula or you're going to a birthing center, I have no frame of reference for that, so I can't speak into that at all. I can only speak to you about my hospital C-sections and my time with my practices with my doctors. Okay, so my emergency C-section, we'll start there. So again, this is my son. This was with my son, who is almost 2. And with him, I went to 41 weeks of, in the womb. So gestational age was 41 weeks. And then they decided to induce me. They'll induce you at 41 weeks for a variety of reasons. If you go see a practice, I'm sure you can fight it and choose to not be induced until like 42 or 43, but they're just going to want to monitor you heavily. So first time bringing a child full term to birth. And so, yeah, I just trusted them and just said, okay, great. We'll go, into an induction at 41 weeks if he doesn't show up. So they gave me, a day, like a time slot, and said, we need you to call the hospital or 12 hours or whatever before your time slot and see if there's room for you. And if there is, then that's when you'll go into the hospital and we'll start the induction process. So it all worked out. We went into the hospital on Wednesday evening around 6, I think. And they started me with Cervidil, which is a cervix softener, which didn't work. And then I got the Fully bulb, which takes you from like 0 centimeters to 5 centimeters over the course of time, and then it falls out once your body like goes past 5 centimeters. And then they broke my water to see if that would bring him down. So the problem was that my cervix was completely closed. I wasn't effaced at all, and he was up super high. So he was like comfy. He was not trying to come out anytime soon. And then they did those, broke my water, put me on the peanut, and then I also had Pitocin. So I had Pitocin too. And by Friday morning, like early morning, by 2:30, the doctor came in and said, we have to do an emergency C-section. So I had been laboring. It didn't feel like labor. I've argued this a ton of times, but all of my new MDs have said, no, you were in labor. So I labored from Wednesday night into Friday morning. And I think the amount of Pitocin that they had given me over the course of time had dropped his blood pressure to the point where at 2:30 a.m. on Friday, the doctor came in and she said, listen, we've done everything. We've broken your water. At this point, there's a chance of infection. His blood pressure isn't doing good, or his heart rate or something. Not his blood pressure. They can't check that in utero. It's my blood pressure. My blood pressure is dropping. His heart rate was dropping. There we go. They were like, we're going to need to do an emergency C-section. So we cried for a minute about it, and then we moved on, and within 30 minutes we were in the OR. So the thing that stands out the most to me about my emergency C-section is the rate in which it happened. She came in, within 30 minutes, I was in the OR. So what did that 30 minutes look like? Well, at this point I had already had a catheter put in, because I got an epidural when I hit like 5 or 6 centimeters because I'm a wimp. And I got an epidural. So I already had a catheter put in. I had the epidural in, so I couldn't like move or anything. They scrubbed out my husband, Bryson. They put him in like a full like hazmat suit with like mask and stuff like that. And they shaved me like in the incision area. They went ahead and shaved me. And then they kind of like a bunch of nurses came in and picked me up, put me on a gurney, and rolled me into the OR. And when I was in the OR, somebody got me up on the table and put me up so that I was sitting on the OR table. No, that's not right. Sorry. They put me on the table with the assumption that my epidural was still in place. The nurse anesthetist that was there hooked up my epidural to her, like to some other like spinal line, and was starting to try to numb me even more. And it turned out that my epidural had come out, and my epidural, so she was trying to numb me, and I was still able to feel like all the places she was touching me. So what will happen is if you have an epidural in, your epidural is not going to fall out. Okay. This was like really rare. The anesthesiology team, I don't think was the best team ever. They'd actually completely replaced them by the time I had my second child. So your epidural is not going to fall out. Some of the things that happened to me, I'm not even going to mention, because they're not going to happen to you, because they're like so rare. So, I didn't have a good C-section the first time, but you don't have to worry about that if you have to have an emergency C-section, because they're probably not going to happen to you. But my epidural did fall out, And so they couldn't get me numb. They couldn't figure it out. And then they realized, oh, your epidural's just dislodged. So they had to re-tap me on the table. So I got a spinal block. I think it had morphine or something in it. I'm not a doctor. I don't know a lot about the medicines that they put inside of my body. So what you need to know is if you don't have a epidural or anything in, they're going to tap you on the table. They're going to walk you through the process. It's going to be totally fine. You're going to sit up on the table. You're going to arch your back. They're going to give you the epidural. Listen, they numb you. The numbing is the worst part. Like they give you a little shot of lidocaine and that's it. Like the epidural, it's not painful. It's really not. There are some points, like if they're trying to find the right nerves or if you're like really a tiny person, it can be kind of hard for them to get the epidural in. And you're going to feel some like weird tingling in your leg, but that's about the extent of it. I promise it's not bad at all. And I'm pretty wimpy, so you'll be fine. But they had to re-tap me on the table. And once they re-tapped me on the table, they had to flip me over and then like kind of put the table at an angle because epidurals and spinal blocks, I believe both of them are gravity fed. So like they need to try to get the medicine onto your nerves in a way that they're going to distribute down your body. So that was a little weird. I wasn't expecting to be like inverted on a table, but I was. And there are all these people around me. I don't know any of them. Some of them have introduced themselves, but for the most part, everybody is in a very serious, very charged atmosphere trying to get me into the position to get this baby out. During this time, I was also hooked up to something called Cell Saver. So Cell Saver is a system that takes your blood, cleans it, and puts it back in your body. I'm a redhead. I bleed really, really bad. So they had been prepared, you know, if I was going to be in, if I had done vaginal birth, they were going to have a hemorrhage cart just in case I bled too much, and then Cell Saver for any type of procedures. So, so they've numbed me finally. I'm on the table. They're putting up the curtain and all of that stuff. Bryson is not in the room. So your spouse or significant other, they're not going to be in the room during the prep, but they will come in before or right when the surgery starts. So have faith that they will be there, but they are not there while you're prepping. So I'm just in this room by myself with all these people. Like things are just kind of like wild and people are, you know, doing all the things, charged atmosphere. And my doctor comes in once I'm all set up. She didn't come in. Nothing's going to start until the screen is up, the blue screen. And they don't tie your arms down or anything. I don't know where that like rumor started, but they do stretch your arms out on the table just to make you more comfortable. So you're not like this, you know, because if you're in the position where you can receive the baby afterwards, like you don't want your arms to only be right here. So your arms are stretched out. It is very cold in the OR. So if you are shaking, sometimes the epidural or the spinal block can make you shake. They will bring really warm towels for you and put them on you. They'll give you oxygen up your nose. So I'd had all of that stuff. My doctor comes in, the surgery starts, and it is very fast. Bryson is brought into the room, and I mean, it is so much intense tugging and pulling. None of it was painful, but it was like she was going to get this baby out. And I started getting really sick on the table. So I started throwing up. So something you need to know for any C-section is that when you get a spinal block or the medicine can drop your blood pressure, and that drop in blood pressure can make you really sick. So you just be aware, and if you start feeling nauseous, you just tell your team, the anesthesiology team, and they'll take care of it for you. Now, I didn't know that was a thing, so I started getting sick on the table. I'm like throwing up into this like little tray that my husband has. It's pretty normal. Honestly, it sucks, but it's pretty normal. And the nurse anesthetist is like, oh, okay, I'm going to try to give you something. And she did try, but it didn't really do anything. I was sick for the majority, I think, of the procedure. So anyways, I'm getting sick. The procedure's going on. It took about 7 or 8 minutes for them to get Zeke out. And my doctor at the time held him up above the curtain. If I have any images that are relevant, I'll throw them on the screen. Held him up above the curtain, kind of in like a Lion King, like Vinyas kind of way. And then he was handed off to the labor and delivery nurses. They have a transporter there for the NICU in case your baby needs to go to the NICU. Zeke did not. They like cleaned him up, stabilized. I got like his vitals, I think put him under a warmer for a minute. And then they tried to hand him over to us. But at this point, my doctor had started the process of sewing me back up, and it was very painful. Or not painful, it was a lot of pressure, and the pressure just made me feel even sicker. So I was pretty sick, continued to be pretty sick, and we really I didn't really even want anything to do with Zeke, sadly. I was like very much out of it. Throwing up on the table was like, had a thought in my head where I was like, nah, like if I just passed out right now, that'd be fine. So eventually I did stop getting sick. It took about 45 minutes for her to sew me back up. And they had given Zeke to Bryson. I don't think I held Zeke until after, until after the surgery. And so it took about 45 minutes. And then once she was done, they escorted Bryson out. I don't even know where Zeke was. Like, I don't remember with either of my kids what happened between surgery and going to the PACU. And another one of my dogs just wandering. So they had escorted Bryson out, and I couldn't move my legs right down below. And so they like took a sheet from the OR table, lifted me up like a whale, kind of like, you know how like they like transport like whales or like elephants on like a sheet with like a helicopter. It's not really a sheet, but you know what I mean. And moved me to a much more comfortable gurney, and then wheeled me into, it's either the PACU or the PICU. It's wherever they receive you after a surgery, where they monitor you for like an hour or two. So they moved me in there. I got a little bit of pain medicine while we were in there. The area that we were in our hospital was like a space in a hallway with a curtain and some instrumentation. It's not like a room like a labor and delivery or mother and baby room. And so then I was in there. I had Zeke and Bryson with me at that point in time. Like, they met me in there with all of our stuff. And that was that. And then we stayed there for a couple of hours, and then we moved to mother and baby, and we stayed there for 72 hours. So typically a hospital will keep you 48 to 72 hours after you've had a C-section. So total with Zeke, we were in the hospital for 5 days. So very long time. But yeah, that was it. And then the recovery, well, it's, you know, C-section recovery can be rough. You just, it hurts a lot. So that is a different topic for a different video, or maybe later in this one. So the main takeaways from my emergency C-section is that it all happened so fast. I barely knew anybody in the room, and I just was not prepared for the amount of like pressure and tugging and kind of how like violent it can feel. Like the pressure can feel. It's not painful at all. This is a different dog, by the way. This is a different dog than the one that was over here earlier. But yeah, so that was really the main thing. And it was not a great experience. Some things went wrong between the throwing up and having to get a second spinal. It was just awful. And it made me really, really nervous for my planned one. And I lived in a lot of anxiety knowing that I was going to have a planned C-section. But it all worked out, and let's talk about my planned C-section now. So my planned C-section was a world of difference. It was so much better than my emergency one, and I spent a lot of time crying about it, like a lot of time crying about my surgery. My good friends, my family, everybody can tell you that I cried a lot because I was so nervous. So they scheduled my surgery, and they scheduled it a few months out. So I knew months out when I was going to have my C-section. And the week before my C-section, I met with the doctor who is going to be delivering Valley. Now, if you go to a practice in the city, I'm not sure how it is in smaller cities or smaller towns. I think it's probably not like this. I think my sisters both have the same doctor their whole pregnancy, and also he delivered their babies. But when you go to a large practice in the city, you see a variety of midwives and doctors, and you don't know, you kind of get whoever's like on call that day. So you don't really ever know who's going to be delivering your baby, which is why if you go to a practice like that, you need to rotate with everybody, all the midwives and all the doctors if you can, when you go in for your appointments. So a week before, I met with the doctor who was going to do it. Cried a lot to her, had been crying to all of the doctors and midwives before, so everybody in the practice was well aware that I was anxious. And she was great because didn't try to talk me off a ledge at all. And because like when I have something set in my head, you can't talk me off the ledge anyways, much to Bryson's chagrin. But she just said, hey, listen, we're going to try to make it the best we can. I'm going to watch some YouTube videos on how to do a C-section. And you're just going to have to get to a place, Sarah, where you can, like, you just know that you're going to have to get over it. Like, you're just going to have to be there and you're just going to have to get through it. She didn't tell me to get over it. She said, we're just going to have to get through it. So she also was really encouraging to talk to anesthesia. So you're going to talk and meet with your anesthesiology team the day of your surgery. And she was like, we need to be very clear with them about your experience last time and make sure that you don't have that experience this time. And was very encouraging for that. So the day of the surgery, we were scheduled to be there at 5:30 because the surgery was going to start at 7:30. So we go in and we check in with labor and delivery and the receptionist. We're taken back to a triage room where they'll triage you to make sure you're actually in labor or to prep you for, surgery if you're going to have a C-section. And the night nurse was still on. And so she did all of our vitals. She hooked me up to a monitor for Valley. She inserted 2 PICC lines because I had to have one for one for Cell Saver because I was going to have that again, and then one for all of my IV fluids and medicines and stuff like that. And so at 7 o'clock is when our hospital rolls over night shift to day shift. And so once 7 o'clock hit, so at 5, let me back up. So at 5:30, we are checking in and we get everything set up. So at about 6 is when we go back into the triage room, 6 a.m. And that's when the night nurse is taking all the vitals. That takes her maybe like 20 minutes. And then once that happens, it's just kind of quiet for 40 minutes. We're just hanging out. I'm crying, lots of tears, lots of shaking, lots of sobbing. And Bryson's just in the room with me, being the best that he can be in the moment. And so then we are just sitting for, until 7. And then once 7 rolls around, it was like, boom, everything started happening. So the day nurses come in, and I don't know if it was like training day in our hospital, but every position had a trainee. It was crazy. For me, that's great because I love people, and the more people, the more comfortable I feel. So then the day nurse comes in, she's introduced by the night nurse. She has a trainee with her. She comes in, she gets Bryson scrubbed out, gives him all the stuff, says, here, change and put all this on, pack up all of your stuff, which, by the way, they're going to tell you not to bring your stuff in until after surgery, because if you're having a scheduled surgery, you don't have a room. So if you are having an emergency C-section, the idea is that you already have a labor and delivery room, so your stuff can stay safe in that room. When the triage rooms that you're received in for a scheduled C-section, they're like constantly being overturned, right? Like people are coming in and out of those. So you don't bring your stuff in, but they do give you a bag to put all your clothes in. And then that kind of just like, somehow they keep up with that. So anyways, so they scrub Bryson out. I get introduced to her, and then walks in the anesthesiologist. She walks in. She was phenomenal. She was like, hey, tell me about your last one. I tell her about the last one. She's like, I start crying. She's like, you know what? You just cry all you need to. She's like, we're going to do everything in our power to make this better. And then that's when she explains to me about the blood pressure, and that dropping blood pressure is what causes a lot of nausea and vomiting on the OR table, and how they're going to prevent that. So that's the first time I had ever understood that was a thing. And she's like, we're going to do everything we can, and I'm going to be with you the whole time, and my nurses are going to be with you, and it's going to be great. And so as she is finishing up, in walks my doctor, and my doctor is like, we talked to anesthesia, we good? We know we're going to make this the best experience ever. Oh, if you hear noises, it's Valley waking up. And then she comes over, the doctor comes over, she pats my knee, she says, Sarah, I watched my YouTube videos, we're going to get it. You ready to get it? Let's get it. And so then she goes. In walks another doctor who's a resident. She introduces herself and says, hey, I'm a resident. I'm going to be assisting with the surgery today. So she was also training. And then in walked 2 more nurses, a guy and a girl, who were the nurse anesthetists. So the guy was training, the girl was the actual nurse anesthetist. And they were like, hey, we heard all about your last experience. You cry if you need to. We're going to make this the best thing ever. So then they walk out. And I think that was all the people that had introduced themselves to me. So that's like 7 people at this point in time. And so then 7:30 hits and it was like go time. Then the labor and delivery nurses come in. I'm like in a gown, right? I have no clothes on. I'm in a gown and they come in and they unhook me from all the things and they put a sheet over my back and I am allowed to walk into the OR. And it is me, Bryson, the anesthesiologist, both the nurse anesthetists, and the 2 labor and delivery nurses. We're all walking back to the OR. It was great. It felt like a whole entourage. They set me up on the table. They asked me to hunch my back over, right? Doing the cat position, relax your shoulders, all those things so that the anesthesiologist can tap me. It took her a little bit longer to tap me, but she said, A, you're just a really tiny woman, and B, I really think she was making sure that it was in the right place because this spinal tap was far better than my first one. So there was a little bit of pain when, she numbed me. And then when she was trying to find the right spot for, between my vertebrae for the tap itself, there was like some weird tingling in my legs. And so it did take a little longer, but then one of the nurse anesthetists had come over and she had been like a yoga instructor, I guess. And so she was like, relax your shoulders, hunch your back, hold my hand, like we're going to get you through it. So she gets the tap in, they turn me over, and they're starting to set up all the curtains and stuff like that. They've put a blood pressure cuff on me so that they can monitor my blood pressure. And they had told me beforehand, they had said, Sarah, you be as loud and as obnoxious as you want to be the second you feel nauseous because we want to prevent it for you. And so the second I started feeling nauseous, and it was pretty fast, like the second the medicine started taking hold, working. The second the medicine started working, I started feeling nauseous, and I would look at them and I just said, I'm feeling nauseous. And they're like, we can tell in your blood pressure, we've already administered something for that. And that happened probably like 4 or 5 times. And every single time I complained, they were already on it. It was amazing. It was just so amazing. So the medicine is starting to work. Sometimes you can feel that like in your chest, like an anesthesia will tell you this, like you can feel like some pressure and like some numbness in your chest. It's totally normal. I didn't feel claustrophobic. I know some people can start to feel claustrophobic as they lose control of their legs. I was like, lose control because then I'm not going to feel anything. So great. So once the medicine had started working, they inserted the catheter. So I'm totally numb. I didn't feel the catheter going in. So the catheter does not hurt going in, and it's really not bad coming out. It's a little uncomfortable coming out, but it's not painful at all. It's just a little bit like, oh, something's not supposed to be up there. So anyway, so they had inserted the catheter. My doctor comes in. She gives me a hard pinch. The nurse or the anesthesiologist is like, did you feel that? Because she just like really pinched you super hard. And I was like, I felt some pressure, but nothing. And she was like, okay, we're good. So then they go ahead and start surgery. They bring in Bryson. And surgery has started. My blood pressure keeps dropping. I keep communicating that. They keep already taking care of it. It was great. And you just need to know the atmosphere was really calm. Like people are chatting, like there's like no rush, no crazy pressure because I'm 39 weeks. I don't think I mentioned that, but they made me have a C-section at 39 weeks. If you have to have a C-section, that is what they will do. You will have it at 39 weeks. They won't even let you get to the point where you could go into delivery, into labor delivery. Anyways, so the atmosphere is just really calm. There were a lot of people in there. I already introduced you to the 7. There's like also the guy that's doing the cell saver. There are a bunch of nurses for the baby itself. Like there are just people everywhere. And so Bryson's in with me. The nurse anesthetist and the anesthesiologist just talked to me the whole time. They're like touching my shoulder, my head, looking me in the eye, Spider-Man style from like upside down. Asking me like, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? The reason they're touching is because they want you to know, like they want to touch you in a place where you're not numb so that if you are claustrophobic, you can feel it. Like, that there's like feeling, it like helps settle you down. So surgery has started. The tugging and pulling is not super bad. Because my doctor already knew how I was feeling about the tugging and pulling, every single time there was going to be a big tug, she would say, hey, big tug, or whatever, and she would communicate with me. She was making jokes. It was just a really easy atmosphere. She kept telling me, she was like, if you throw up, I'm leaving you open. All right, so no throwing up. And so about 5 minutes into the surgery, the midwife walks in. So my practice has doctors and midwives. I've already said that. And the midwives assist in the surgery at like for the patient, essentially. They don't like assist the doctor, but they're there for the patient. And so in walks this midwife who I like loved and adored. She's the one I had cried to about my appointment, about having to have a C-section the first time. And it was just great. So she walks in, she's like getting videos, getting pictures. Some of the videos and pictures I don't think I can post. I think they're too graphic for YouTube. But it takes probably about like 15 minutes to get Valley out because there really wasn't a hurry. So it took kind of twice as long. And they pull her out and they didn't even give us an option. They just like dropped the curtain. And my doctor said, Sarah, lift your head up. You have to see her coming out. And so they made Bryson and I watch her coming out. You can't see anything. Okay, like there's a bunch of stuff in the way. You can just see her emerging. So they pulled her out. We got to see it. They put the curtain back up. They take the baby over to like the warming station. You know, they're checking on the baby, cleaning her up, making sure everything's good, wrapping her up, making sure all the things are fine. So it was probably like 5 or 10 minutes before we got Valley. And then they start the process of sewing me back up, and it was much less intense than it was the first time, either because all of my scar like tissue had built up and I had no feeling, or I had no feeling because I had, I don't know. It just wasn't, it was not intense. The sewing back up was not super intense. And my midwife came over with the baby. She put the baby on my chest. And for the next like 45, 50 minutes, I just held Valley the whole time. And my midwife stayed with me, held on to Valley with me, right? Because you're like laying on a table. So it's like a little kind of weird. So she's holding Valley. Every time, there were a couple of like really big pulls, like as they're like tucking stuff back in, and I would grab my midwife's hand and she would be like, just hold it, it's fine. So anyways, they finished doing all the sewing, all the stitching. You do need to know that in a lot of cases, they cauterize certain tissues, so you will kind of smell like a burning flesh smell at some points. If they do it well, I don't actually think that you smell it really bad. I don't remember it with the second one, but yeah, just know that that's like a thing, but it's like much better for you to be cauterized than to be stitched. So they finished the surgery. Surgery goes great. I never get sick one time. Beautiful. So then they escort Bryson out once I'm all sewed up. They escort him out. I don't know where the baby went. I don't know if she was with me. I don't know if she was with Bryson. I don't know if she was with the nurse. I don't know where she was. I don't remember. And then they do the whale thing where they move you onto the nice, like, soft gurney. And then they wheeled us into the PACU, I can't remember what it's called. And then just kind of starts that like whole healing process. So things to take away from the planned C-section. They were all aware of the things that I was worried and nervous about, and it was a much calmer atmosphere. It actually took longer. It took like she was pulled out. Yeah, it took like an hour and a half, I think. Total? No, it probably took longer than that because she was pulled out around like 8:20. So we went in at 7:30, got all the stuff scrubbed out, and then she was pulled out. So, but like I said, the atmosphere was like so calm and so nice. And then, yeah, and they were just all really aware of all the things I was scared of and were very accommodating for that. Okay, just a couple of tips going into your C-section. First, make sure you know how your practice works. This is if you're having a C-section or if you're having a like a vaginal delivery. It doesn't matter. Just if you go to a practice, make sure you know how it works, because you need to know if you're not going to have one specific doctor or midwife. You need to know all of them, so that way you're comfortable with everybody. Know how it works. Also, at 36 weeks, you should have a this is our labor and delivery walkthrough, where they walk through the possibilities with you. We sign a bunch of paperwork. That should be something that happens. You need to make sure that happens at your practice and ask questions. Say, how does this work if I have a vaginal delivery? What does that process look like? And then if something goes wrong, and what are the things that could go wrong that could make me have a C-section? And then find out, how does that process work in an emergency C-section? If you have a scheduled C-section, you need to say, how does this process work? And what is it like to have a scheduled C-section, and what can I expect today of? So be really loud also about your worries. You are not a burden, and your worries are valid, and they want to know. This is your team. These are people that have walked with you for 9 months. Like, their priority is you. They did this because not for the money. I promise they didn't decide to be doctors and midwives for the money. They want to do it because they care about mothers and they care about babies and they want you to have the best experience. So they want to know your worries, especially because they don't want to know like day of, like they want to be prepared for them. So be loud about the things that you're scared about and cry all you want. Do all the crying, cry. Because the more you cry, the more you release those emotions, and also the more you let people know you're serious about your worries, and they'll start taking them serious too. Ask for prayer from your community. Even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in prayer, ask for good vibes, whatever. Just ask for prayer, because I think so much of my anxiety was eased or distracted by the prayers of the people around us. Because I just reached out on Instagram and asked for prayer, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of love I received in text messages and DMs. Like I couldn't respond to people. There were that many. And that was so comforting. I mean, it made me cry harder because I was like, oh, these people are so kind and people love me. But it was still much better than being anxious. And I do think that prayer has such a powerful hold on the world. And I think that my C-section and the team that I got, and not throwing up on the table, and I specifically asked for people to pray that I wouldn't be sick on the table, that my anxiety would be lessened, and that I wouldn't feel like the pressure and tugging and pulling would be much more manageable. And it all was. Oh, and then obviously the baby came safe, but she's fine. She's safe. We're not worried about her. Another thing that you can do in the dead of night when you are feeling super anxious, and you're anxious about even if you're going to have a vaginal delivery, or you're anxious like, am I going to have an emergency C-section, or you're anxious because you have a scheduled C-section, and your mind is just doing that thing where it just buries you in anxiety and buries you in all the ways things can go wrong. You can combat it by thinking of all the ways things could go right. So just breathe in, stop yourself, and say, what is it going to look like if things go well? And allow yourself to do that. Don't think that you're being naive or not planning or whatever. You're just allowing yourself to have some space to feel joy and hope. So just try to combat all of that anxiety and worry by thinking, what if it goes right? Let me daydream this going right in my head, and what that looks like, and what I want my birth to look like, and ideally. And then also remind yourself, if you're having a scheduled C-section and you're nervous, it's just an hour of my life. It's an hour of my life for one of the best gifts. I just got to get on the other side of it. I would just tell myself, I just got to get on the other side of Tuesday. Tuesday was the C-section. I just got to get on the other side of it. As it crept closer, I'd be like, in 24 hours, I'm going to be on the other side of it, and it's going to be fine, and it's going to be great. And then the healing can begin. So those are some of my big tips. For just like if you're feeling really anxious about birth and having a C-section. So I'm sure there are things that I missed. I'm sure watch back over this video and think like, oh, I didn't talk about that. So maybe I'll insert myself in somewhere, just, clearing some things up. But if you have any questions or any like thoughts of your own, like let me know down in the comments below and I'll respond. Or reach out to me. My Instagram is @reddanger. Feel free to DM me, and I'll answer any questions that you have. If you made it through this 40-minute video, thank you so much. Remember, this is just my experience. Everybody has a different experience. Stop doomsday prepping if you're not in control. So don't terrify yourself, because it's not going to be worth it. Trust me. And I hope that everything goes well with you in your pregnancy. I'm so grateful that you were here. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, y'all.